Now Elena with us in the studio as ever. One of our top stories, of course, the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Paul Stephenson, stepping down over his News International links all over the papers, I would assume.
It makes all the headlines for front British papers, as you might expect. Independent there, hacking, Stephenson quits, Brooks arrested, and The Guardian's front page this morning is Met Chief quits over hacking. You start to get the feeling now that even in those papers who have done the most to dig out News International's misdeeds, this story is going a little bit too fast for them to catch up with it. They didn't quite foresee they would rebound quite so spectacularly so quickly. The Guardian says in their editorial today that the number of dead bodies on the stage now looks like the end of a Shakespearean tragedy. And but yes, indeed. But the paper's editorial says once Sir Paul Stephenson had admitted taking £12,000 worth of a free health spa stay from a company linked to News International, he had to go. They say they hope he's now willing to spill the beans on the other senior police officers. Of course, there's some big questions hanging over possible corruption at the Met now. They also notice the amount of cynicism around the police in Britain has now reached such a pitch that when Rebekah Brooks, the former News of the World editor, was arrested yesterday, all the commentaries on Twitter were asking if this wasn't some kind of ruse by her friends in the police to prevent her from having to answer the questions of MPs on Tuesday, which of course now she can refuse to answer most of them as she might prejudice her own criminal case.
It is very bizarre, isn't it? Because it started off with a story about police corruption, but of course it's the political side which is gaining momentum as well, and closer links, or it becoming closely linked with David Cameron now.
That's what The Independent is focusing on. They point out, of course, that Paul Stephenson has stepped down, mostly because he employed a former News of the World journalist to do his PR. Now, that man, Neil Wallace, of course, wasn't directly linked to phone hacking, didn't have to resign because of it, and hasn't been arrested because of it. The man who did have to resign and has been arrested is Andy Coulson, and who employed him, David Cameron. So the paper is saying that it looks increasingly like the Prime Minister has to answer questions about this. Notice that this isn't just papers like The Independent and The Guardian who you might expect to be attacking David Cameron, who is saying this. Also in the Telegraph's leader today, and a number of prominent Tory bloggers who would be behind David Cameron all the way have been up until now, and now really starting to say this could bring the British Prime Minister down.
And Murdoch, though, Rupert Murdoch, still seems quite defiant, doesn't he, in the Wall Street Journal, his own newspaper?
Well, his own Wall Street Journal prints quite a shocking editorial today, I must say. Really very defiant about the behaviour that went on at News International. They say some misbehaviour at one paper doesn't need to tarnish all of its stablemates. There's a strong defence in there of Les Hinton, who was, of course, the man ultimately in charge of the Wall Street Journal until he resigned on Friday. They say they've got no reason, staff there, to disbelieve his assertions that he knew nothing about phone hacking when he was in charge of Rupert Murdoch's British newspapers at the time, of course, that most of this took place. They also say that the British tabloid press, or the British press in general, is notorious for using the dark arts to find out their stories, that they even say the News of the World didn't do anything that other British tabloids didn't do, and they also attacked The Guardian, saying that it's hypocritical of them to be going after News International's misbehaviour over hacking people when The Guardian published WikiLeaks' leaked cables and, of course, entered into a partnership with WikiLeaks. You could, of course, say that in terms of the information revealed, the stuff that was in the WikiLeaks cables is rather different in terms of public interest than hacking into murdered teenagers' mobile phones. But the Wall Street Journal doesn't seem to see that distinction. They're really very defiant in that editorial today. How that will go down with the readers remains to be seen.
OK, two completely different stories now. First one, Hugo Chavez going back to Cuba for more cancer treatment, and the Venezuelan press asking if his kind of mode of politics can survive.
Yeah, let's look at Tal Cual's editorial. They say Chavez's absence proves one thing, which is that none of his ministers is really up to filling his shoes. They say he's created such a huge kind of hyper-presidency, that there's no other successor either within his own party or possible opposition candidate that has his charisma and his possible media position. They're asking also if the political movement he created, which is called Chavismo, could survive his possible retirement from politics, as he is, of course, probably very ill. And they say that although many on the right are kind of hoping that cancer is possibly even fatal in order to get him off the political scene, they say his movement has deep roots in Venezuelan society, and even if he is removed from the scene personally, it might not be everything that the right wing are hoping for.
OK, Elena, thank you very much. We're out of time. Thank you very much, though. International Papers here on France 24 every day with Elena on this channel. Let's have a look at the headlines once again. The UK's top policeman resigns as Rupert Murdoch's former right-hand woman is released on bail. The phone hacking scandal